PFF Steve Palazzolo loves the Cincinnati Bengals draft, so let's chat with him about what he likes so much about this Bengals draft class.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. Today we'll be joined by Steve Palazzolo to talk about why he likes this Bengals draft class so much and thinks it might be the best in the AFC North, despite a lot of praise going around for some of the other AFC North teams. We appreciate everybody who makes this show part of their everyday routine and who makes us their first listen. You can find Locked On Bengals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. So please do subscribe if you like hearing about the Cincinnati Bengals as part of your daily routine. Today's episode brought to you by Monopoly Go, a mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play.
And Jake, let's get to Steve, where we talk about all of the Bengals' top picks, day one, day two, one, day three gem. And boy, oh boy, do we spend time on my favorite position, wide receiver. Without further ado, let's get to our conversation with Pro Football Focus's Steve Palazzolo.
We're now joined by Steve Palazzolo, the PFF NFL analyst and head of football product, co-host of the PFF NFL show, currently going through their division-by-division draft reviews. And Steve, both on the live show and in your immediate post-draft recap show, you were pretty high on the Bengals draft. I think you said that after talking about the Ravens draft and the Steelers draft, which are getting a lot of love around the country, the Bengals might have the best draft in the AFC North. What do you love about it?
Well, we'll talk about my wild card, Jermaine Burton, in just a minute. I mean, he's the biggest piece, I think, for me because of what he can become. But I thought, good decisions. I think, Amarius Mims was, a target. I'm sure you guys talked quite a bit about him leading up to the draft. I think it's a good fit for, perhaps sitting behind Trent Brown in year one, giving him some development time. He only has the 803 career snaps, but I think he's got incredible potential as a pass protector. I think he was a better developmental prospect than Tyler Guyton, who went about 10 or 11 picks later than him from Oklahoma to the Cowboys. So I love Mims there. And I think Kris Jenkins is just a playmaker on the defensive line. That dude finishes plays. Excellent run defender. It fits a need, but also I thought it was great value. I mean, Jim Harbaugh said he was a top 10 pick in the future. So how could you go wrong with that? And then Burton, like I said, is the wild card. I think he has top end wide receiver potential. I mean, when I was watching Burton's film, I really didn't know what to expect, but I was like 3 plays in and I was like, what? This guy's incredible at everything. Downfield ability, tracking, hands are incredibly strong. He can win at the catch point. The whole thing with Burton, of course, is going to be the off-field concerns. And, as I was texting people, people are like, we don't know if he's just off all the boards, several boards. We don't know where, is he going to be a late day 3 guy? I don't know what he is, but I honestly thought he was the 4th best receiver in the draft class. I thought he was a first-round talent. And so if they can keep him, straight, if they can keep him his head on straight or whatever it might be, I think Burton becomes the steal of the draft potentially.
Let's stick with Burton. And I think we're going to ask you more about Mims and ask you more about Kris Jenkins as well. But as far as Burton is concerned, is he the ideal fit in this offense where you have T. Higgins for 1 more year, you lose Tyler Boyd? The Bengals over the past few years have said how they wanted to get more explosive. It hasn't necessarily happened. Certainly last year it didn't happen. And so does Burton check all of those boxes, at least on the field, of what, if you had to design a receiver for the Bengals to target in the draft, does he check all those boxes?
Yeah, I mean, check the boxes is like a really good term, I think, for Burton, because that's what I was doing when I was watching him. I'd watch a few plays and say, hey, he feels explosive down the field. Let me go double check our PFF gas metric, which tracks on-field athleticism. And he's 99th percentile over the last few years. Similar players. So Jalen Waddle had 99th percentile. Puka Nacua had 99th percentile. Now, Tutu Atwell did as well. It's not all hits, but it's a lot of really good on-field explosive athletes. Then I'm looking at Burton's hands. I'm like, man, his hands feel really good. What's his drop rate? Oh, it's one of the best we've ever seen since 2014. I try to watch the film first and then go back to look at the data to see if it, confirms or, works against what I'm seeing on film. So I think Burton ticks all the boxes as an all-around receiver. The only thing you don't have a stat for that backs things up is probably yards after the catch. But for Burton, it's because he was targeted down the field a ton. Then there's a play like Texas A&M where he catches it, runs through a couple guys for a touchdown. So I think he's capable of doing that. So that's why I really think the Bengals fascinate me, or any team that has the quarterback locked up, because they're going to have to make shrewd decisions during the life of a Joe Burrow contract, right? So you can't have 6 players making $20 million or more. You can only have a couple of those guys. Like the Chiefs can only choose a couple of those guys. So where do you get cheaper? Where do you get the value players? And I think Burton has a chance to be that value player. If you can't keep T. Higgins beyond this year, Burton has a chance to step in, I think, be the true number 2 to Jamar Chase and an all-around threat. I also love the way Burton worked the back shoulder game. And if that helps Joe Burrow throw the ball down the field a little bit more and opens things up, because obviously things got with the injury and everything, that offense the first half of last year, the first few weeks of last year, just wasn't the same. So yeah, I think Burton ticks all the boxes for what you want for that playmaker opposite Jamar Chase. And if it is, you don't need him for another year and he's just a deep threat in year one, I think that'd be a perfect way to use him right now.
He played a lot of slot in his second to last year, his junior year at Alabama. The Bengals obviously have that need right now. Maybe Charlie Jones steps into that role this year, but is there slot inside outside versatility with Burton? Do you think if they need him in the short term to play in the slot, is that something you could see him being ready for in year one?
I think so. The only thing is, slot's different in every offense. I think if you're asking him if there is a weakness or a thing that's not necessarily a strength for Burton, or not the thing that you want to lean on for Burton, I don't think you want him running all the short area slot routes necessarily, the 5-yard option routes or anything. Again, not that he can't do it. It's just I think he's a vertical threat. So if you're going to use your slot to stretch the field a little bit more, I think he's fine in that role. But I think he can play inside or outside. But the short area game is the place where I think you don't necessarily want to lean on Burton as much. I want him going down the field more. And
from a fit perspective, they could put Charlie there or Jamar there, who they've run plenty of. Like it seems like, not that he'll play the same number of snaps as Boyd, but he can take over a decent amount of that load, and then it also allows them to be flexible with Chase. And I think that's why they probably did land on Burton, despite the character stuff, is he fits better than a Troy Franklin, or better than they viewed a Roman Wilson, who they picked a few picks after them, after they took Burton. So I do think from that perspective, it fits the current roster.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's T. Higgins this year and Burton, and then, as you mentioned, Jamar Chase can do it all. Now, I don't feel great about Chase being the high volume, 15 target, bubble screen, dink and dunk type of guy that he had to become at times last year. I'd still rather Chase be more of the vertical threat, but I get the idea, right? Get the ball into the hands of your best player. So the fact that Chase can do that, I think putting Burton and Higgins as the 2 outside guys and letting Chase work the slot, I think it does bring a ton of flexibility to the offense. So look, I love the pick because I think Burton's a first round value player. I'm not alone in loving Burton, maybe at the level that I like him, but other people saw that as far as the on-field ability. Again, it's just a matter of, there were not people at Georgia or Alabama that really wanted to go to bat for him from a character standpoint. Obviously, that the Bengals did their homework. That's just all the rumblings that we heard were, driven around the character stuff. Because I think he would have heard his name called much earlier if that wasn't a factor.
And maybe there's just a chip on his shoulder. The Bengals do love the players that come out with chips on their shoulder, as much as they've shied away from guys like that in the past, where you couldn't find a coach on the college team to go to bat for him. They tend to draft team captains on the other end of the spectrum instead. And Jermaine Burton will be a fun piece. And if nothing else, you mentioned the back shoulder ability for Jermaine Burton. Joe Burrow loves throwing those back shoulders. And if he does find his way into the slot, maybe it's just a rotation in Cincinnati where they can go, to their Yosavash, Charlie Jones, Trenton Irwin, 4 through 6, perhaps. But if he is in the slot, that 9-8-9 play the Bengals love to run, and Joe Burrow loves to run so much, with Jermaine Burton running the post, is a lot more threatening down the middle of the field, I think, than Tyler Boyd was. Not to take anything away from Tyler, but Jermaine Burton's vertical ability, like you said, Steve, a little bit more tantalizing in that particular role. But you mentioned Kris Jenkins, a playmaker, and we'll of course talk about Amarius Mims as well. We're taking a time out here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know we already talked about it and it's a flag on the play, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. There's so much you can win together. So the more you win, the more prizes you unlock, and you can get unique stickers. You can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel around the boards with, hilarious emojis so you can taunt your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and download it for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on.
Today's show is also brought to you by Schultz Jewelers. Mother's Day is less than 2 weeks away, which means you need to get your tail to Schultz Jewelers because right now, well, you can get matching permanent bracelets. You can find affordable, unique gifts starting at just $45. They have a wide selection of sterling silver, gold-filled, solid gold. Plus, while you're at Schultz Jewelers, maybe you don't feel comfortable buying without your mom there. We'll take your mom there and you can get a professional photo done with you and your mom. It is fine jewelry. And Matt Schultz and his team, well, they're huge Bengals fans. They've been in the business for over 7 decades. So get to Schultz Jewelers today. It's a modern jewelry store. They have unique custom designs, top-rated permanent jewelry, and they're really close to downtown Cincinnati at 2202 Dixie Highway in Fort Mitchell, 5 minutes from the bridge into Kentucky. Check them out online at schulzdiamonds.com. That's schultzdiamonds.com. We know the Bengals strive for perfection. Schultz Jewelers does too, because when it has to be perfect, it has to be Schultz Jewelers.
Let's transition to Kris Jenkins, though. You describe him as a value pick, as a playmaker. When I saw the second round start, I'm clamoring for the Bengals to trade up and go get Johnny Newton. I know you at PFF, at least Trevor Sycam's big board, also really liked Johnny Newton there in the second round. But talk about Kris Jenkins, the playmaker, and what he brings to the defense.
Yes. So mostly the run game, we've got the college data going back to 2014. Jenkins had one of the best run stop percentages that we've seen since 2014. So his tackles in and around the line of scrimmage in the run game. And you see that on film. He sheds quickly, gets up and down the line. He makes a ton of plays. So it's a completely different style than what they're losing in DJ Reader, who's going to hold the point. And, Reader was an incredible playmaker in his own way. Jenkins is smaller. His dad was much bigger. His dad was more of a DJ Reader type of player, hold the point and, destroy blockers. But Jenkins doesn't hold the point as well. He doesn't have that same kind of anchor, but he will finish plays. He will make plays. And so I think the value there is, getting teams into 2nd and 9 and 2nd and 8 and in making those plays in and around the line of scrimmage early on early downs. I don't think Jenkins, you wanted Johnny Newton. I don't think Jenkins is the same type of pass rusher as a Newton. I think he's fine. He's a solid pass rusher. He's not as dynamic as those top 2 defensive tackles, Byron Murphy or Johnny Newton, that went off the board. But I think they were the first 2. They're the top 2 that should have gone. Rook actually went ahead. I don't know. Yeah. That was a little bit high, I think, for Rook. But either way, I like Kris Jenkins, and I think it fits a need, but not that specific DJ Reader need. It just fits like, hey, we need a player on the interior that can make some plays.
Do you think he fits pretty well with Sheldon Rankin specifically, who's under contract for the next 2 years? Obviously, BJ Hill is in the final year of his contract as well, because I think Jenkins is going to be DT3 this season.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he probably spells Rankins more than anything, mix them up. I would rather have Rankins, play a little bit more on passing downs, and maybe Jenkins does sneak in there on run downs. So I think it just gives you that rotation. And look, depth is so important. It sounds crazy to be like, oh, it's a 17-game schedule now, but that extra week does matter. It does have an impact when teams are beat up at the end of the year, and it's like, hey, go play an extra game. So the rotation matters. The depth matters, and I think it's a fine fit with Rankins and everything that they have there on the defensive line.
And an 18th game coming to all of us soon, apparently.
For player safety, we have to take care of the players and put them out there for an extra game.
Well, we'll get 18 games, but they'll be able to wear those Guardian caps. So,
perfect
tit for tat. Kris Jenkins, you mentioned that the pass rush ability not on the level of Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton. Is there upside there? Because he did test like a pretty good athlete. He looks like a good athlete on tape. He was nicknamed the mutant for his prowess in the weight room and for his ability as an athlete. Obviously, doesn't seem to be terribly refined as a pass rusher at this point, but is there upside there if you can put together a better plan in the NFL?
Yeah, I think there's always a little bit of that if you're getting a good athlete and a guy, again, that he's going to, I think, make his money on early downs as a starting point. And there's, it's a different position, but a guy like Khalil Mack did that when he came in, where he was just an unbelievable run defender in year one, wasn't as effective as a pass rusher, but by year two it clicked and he had it. So I think there are certain players who, Donnell Hunter was actually, again, it's an edge defender, but he was a really good run defender at LSU, had the pass rush athleticism, just needed to develop the tools, and at the NFL level, develops the pass rush ability to go with what he could do against the run. So I think there is a history of take the good athlete who knows how to destroy blocks, defeat blocks up front, and you can teach them a little bit as far as pass rush goes.
Before we get to Amarius Mims, and obviously he's a very big man and a big topic, but we might as well stick with the defensive line and McKinnley Jackson, because the Bengals in between with Burton, but they take two defensive linemen on day two. McKinnley Jackson is that DJ Reader mold. Obviously, we're not expecting him to be DJ Reader, but what did you see from him when you watched him?
Yeah, this was the first pick I didn't love. And look, I get it. I mean, you're trying to get that nose tackle body type in there. I think he's just got a ways to go. When you're talking about a guy that's in the 320, 330 range, he's got some athleticism. To me, he's more of a gap shooter than your classic, hold the point type of nose tackle. So he's got that going for him. I just don't think he sees the game that well yet. Can shed blocks and make plays. There's a lot of plays where he just couldn't get off blocks, and guys are running right by him. So I think there's potential there as far as the size, the speed, the athleticism, the get off. There's some of that, but I think he's just a tick behind some of the other nose tackle prospects that you'd be looking for here.
You mentioned the one gapping style. Is he miscast as a nose tackle? Is he nose tackle body, but not nose tackle in mentality and play style?
Kind of. But the thing is, I don't think he's shooting gaps like other players either. You don't necessarily want him doing that either. I just think that's where he had the most success at Texas A&M. So I think it just kind of takes some time to say, okay, here's how we're going to use that size, use the body, see plays a little bit better. I thought Mason Smith, the defensive tackle out of LSU, was very similar, where there's Smith's a better athlete, but there's potential, and just got to learn how to play football better at this point. Shed blocks, finish plays. And I think Jackson's similar in that regard.
Were there other nose tackles still available? Obviously, Tavondre Sweat went probably where he would have went before the charge. Were there any nose tackles at 97 that you would have preferred?
No.
Because it felt early to us too, full disclosure. I think that's the pick. A lot of people were like, oh, okay, they had to have him.
So that's the tricky part, right? No, I don't think there were any really good nose tackle prospects in the middle rounds. So there's this idealistic world that I like to live in, where teams truly take the best players on their board, and they don't go and fill needs, and they never stretch, and they never manipulate the grade a little bit. It's a higher grade because we had the nose tackle need, but we're not drafted for need, but it kind of gets rolled into the board. Right. So I think that's just the reality of it. If you need a true nose tackle, like it was Tavondre Sweat, I mean, that's it. So I didn't love many of the interior D-line prospects beyond the fourth round in this draft.
That was the theme from everyone we talked to going into the draft. That was our perspective going into the draft was, late day 3. That's where all the nose tackles in this draft should probably live. Even Evan Anderson signs a massive deal for an undrafted free agent with the San Francisco 49ers, was a guy that the Bengals met with and a guy that we liked for the Bengals, late.
I would have preferred that.
3.
Yeah.
And then you can use your last top 100 pick for something that maybe has a little bit more positional value.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on my own little tangent there, but I would be fascinated. There are definitely picks that teams make on day 2 that feel very need-driven, right? This guy fits what we do. This is just a massive hole on the roster. I wonder if they just never went down that path. I think there's more starting caliber players, say, rather than backup players. I think there's starting caliber players to still be had on day 2 if teams really stuck to that truly all the way through.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is where you need to go right now because the NBA playoffs are in full swing. The NHL playoffs are in full swing. Baseball, the Cincinnati Reds trying to make it to the postseason, and well, they're hovering around 500, which is why you need to get to FanDuel today, where new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. So maybe you think that the Indiana Pacers are going to surprise everyone and not only beat the Bucks, but make a run to the NBA Finals. Or maybe you're buying the Orlando Magic after they won 2 straight against the Cavs. Well, regardless of who you're buying this NBA playoff season, you can do so right now and get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. One guy that is starting caliber, hopefully day 1, even though they're probably not going to lean on him day 1 pending health, is Amarius Mims, the 18th overall pick. Nearly 6'8", 340 pounds. You mentioned it, just over 800 snaps at Georgia. So there's some projection involved. But when they took Amarius Mims, did you think it was the right call?
Yeah, I thought it was fine. I definitely thought he was in the mix there with the Bengals at that spot, maybe the Steelers at 20. I think he could play left or right tackle. He's very smooth in pass protection for that size. To me, it's just, look, to me, when I look at things, like his PFF grading was solid for when he was out there. He's good pass protector, some improvements to be made in the run game. I think everything I saw was technique driven and experience driven. And offensive line, I mean, that's the part here to keep an eye on is offensive linemen generally take 2 or 3 years to fully develop, and they take a little bit longer. I think our grades back that up. I think scouts would tell you that. I think general perception is, hey, sometimes offensive linemen take a little bit longer. So is that longer if he's able to sit? Is it just based off snaps and experience? I'm not sure exactly, but it's nice that he's not like out there right now, has to protect Joe Burrow and, go get him. They can ease him in. Maybe they dabble in guard a little bit, let him move around, but I think he can play left or right, gives them that flexibility. And after years of kind of, I don't want to say stitching it together on the offensive line, but I thought they made some really nice moves with, Ted Karras a couple years ago, and they've made some good moves. They haven't drafted high. Now they're drafting high, and if he's a hit at tackle, it's amazing value getting the first. We talked about first contract quarterbacks. The first contract tackle is an extremely valuable position, and again, that's where I think the Bengals have to balance things. You need these first contract contributors while you're weighing who are our $20 million guys otherwise. So I think that's all of that added together. Mims' potential, the fact that he's already a good player. Again, I think he's a much better player than Tyler Guyton right now, and they were compared a lot as, quote, developmental tackles. I think if you put Mims out there, even with the inexperience, he'd be fine. But it is nice that maybe they could pick their spots, and when he's ready, and that they do have the Trent Brown 1-year deal to kind of give him a chance to learn.
Yeah, he does have that runway. But one of the things that I really like about Mims specifically as a fit for the Bengals is nothing to do with the size. And you're taller than Amarius Mims, is that right? 6'10"? All right.
Yeah,
probably the only person we're ever going to talk to Amarius Mims about who's taller than Amarius Mims.
Sam, if you guys could set this up somehow, Sam's trying to get me to go to a buffet with Orlando and Trent Brown and Amarius Mims. They're just trying to get us all to go hang out, and as long as it's a buffet and not
you would tower over them too. Could
right.
You out eat them? That's the question.
I don't know. I could eat, but I feel like NFL offensive linemen they're at a special level.
Another level, yes.
What I was going to bring up there before we got distracted by how tall Steve is. No, that's a great tangent. We'll see if we can help you get that going. The strength for Amarius Mims' game is natural pass protection. The footwork already looks great for a guy who's especially only played 800 snaps. You watch his first game against Ohio State in 2022 college football playoff, and he's a shutdown pass protector against some NFL players for the most part. Shutdown pass protector against future NFL players on that OSU defensive line. That strength of his being a natural pass protector and having that part of his game more advanced than you would think for the amount he's played, good awareness, good footwork, good hand placement, lockdown grip strength. With the Bengals being a pass-happy offense, Is that something that can boost his chance of success where they're not as worried about how good are you as a run blocker right away?
Yeah, I think that's a big factor. The other thing, and I was using this for Fashanu, who went to the Jets, that he was a similar guy. I think where the profile is excellent pass protector and has room to grow in the run game. Just using PFF grades as an example, if you trust the grading, the tackles tend to grade a little bit better in wide zone schemes. And so I feel like there are ways, if teams are shrewd about things, to learn, figure out how to where the strengths and weaknesses lie. And if there's one thing the Bengals have done the last couple of years is they've changed the offense when they've needed to. They've evolved the offense where needed. So it's kind of like trusting them to play to the strengths of their team. And I know the linemen are huge. I know they're huge. So you immediately think we've got 340, 350 pounders, run downhill, run power. But like Trent Brown's been an excellent outside zone, run blocker. And I think Mims has that type of potential. And Orlando Brown's blocked well in any type of scheme. So I think that part is interesting too. I don't want to say you can hide the run blocking, but handling pass protection first. And the Bengals, when they put the ball in Joe Burrow's hands on that Super Bowl run, it was like, hey, we're going to drop back 45, 50 times and put it on Burrow. I'm not saying they have to do that, but I think that's going to end up being their bread and butter when it comes down to, the playoff run, put the ball in his hands. And I think Mims is, has the skill set to be able to protect for sure.
And when they did that, that was with guys who are now mostly out of the NFL blocking for him on that.
Right. Yeah. Quick passing game to protect Burrow.
Yeah. They were out of the NFL the moment Super Bowl 56 ended. Some of them, it was pretty quick. Last thing, at least for me, Stephen, we appreciate the time. Matt Lee is a popular pick among Bengals fans. There was some interior offensive line thirst throughout day 3. They get it with the final pick. I think a lot of people expected him to go a bit earlier. What do you think about the Bengals' new center?
He was 229 on the consensus board last time I saw. And look, I have a trusty little draft model here. This thing is, if you're talking doubling and tripling hit rates, it'll help. And I'm just telling you, he's a model guy. So the model likes Matt Lee. And if, there's not a lot of them on day 3, there's not a lot of these guys. Most guys on day 3 are developmental. So I just think the Bengals took a guy who has, we'll say, higher chances than others to become a guy, sit as a backup and maybe eventually take over at center if that development continues.
I've called him a starter of the future despite being a 7th round pick, which maybe is a little bit generous for a guy who's your last pick in the draft. He's not going to have a ton of rope because that's what tends to happen with 7th round picks, but good athlete, immaculate pass protection, production in college at both schools where he played, a lot of experience, and just a little undersized. And so that, I assume, plus being a center-only prospect, pushes him down the board. But I wonder how similar your model is to our model, because our model spits him out as a top 100 player in the class with starting upside. And I find it interesting that that's the guy that stands out on your model as well.
Yeah, it's probably similar. I classify the guys differently because I'm not necessarily trying to predict the best 100 players. It's more, I use the consensus board as like a baseline, and then let it highlight who I should take in and around those times. So let's just say he's one of the 7th rounders. If he's available in the 7th round, he's one of the guys I would have targeted. So I think that was certainly a good value pick. We'll find out because, like you said, it's tough to, have that opportunity and, stay on the roster the 2 or 3 years needed to maybe take over as starter as a center only prospect. But I thought of all the 7th round picks you're going to take, he was one of them, one of the better ones.
He's got a path to the backup job right away where he just has to beat out Trey Hill, who hasn't taken the steps the Bengals, I think, have been looking for. And there's no other centers on the roster right now as far as, besides an undrafted free agent who competed at the spot last year in camp. Steve, we appreciate the time. You can find him on the PFF NFL show where you will be recapping the rest of the drafts. I think this week, is that right? You're going to go through the rest of the divisions?
That's right. So division by division.
There will be some more thoughts, I'm sure, from Steve and his co-host Sam Monson on the Bengals draft over on the PFF NFL show. Steve, again, appreciate the time. And until next time, Bengals fans, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.